Hi, I'm Phil.
And I'm Lydia. We're the hosts of the Holy Earth podcast.
And on the podcast, we've shared some amazing stories of stewardship. And many of those stories are made possible by supporters like you.
This year, Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship has cleaned up hundreds of pounds of trash, planted thousands of trees, and served over 1,200 hours across the world.
Your donation this Giving Tuesday will help these local projects to grow even more and help us empower even more people to feel that sense of awe and wonder in creation. So, will you help us? Every little bit makes a big difference.
You can follow the link to donate today. Thank you.
As an individual, the most power you have is over the food that you put in your mouth, because you do it 3 times a day. And I've heard it estimated that the individual has, on average, eats around 200 animals a year. 200. And if you think you don't have power, that's insane how much power you have. You have so much power, and don't ignore the power that you have. And it can be just cutting the amount of meat you're eating in half. It does not have to be all or nothing. It can be 1 meatless meal a week, and that makes a difference.
Welcome to Holy Earth, where we explore the intersection of faith and earth stewardship. I'm your host, Lydia Theobald.
And I'm your host, Phil Fernberg.
Our guest today is Alisia Essig, an expert on plant-based eating and the founder of the nutrition education and coaching company PlantWhys. Allie is going to share some of the reasons she turned to plant-based eating and share some amazing plant-based cooking ideas for the holidays.
Are you excited? I'm excited.
I'm so excited. My mom is plant-based, and we're always kind of talking about recipes and things, and it's something I want to become better at. So I'm super excited to hear from Allie today.
It's going to be a great conversation. Before we get to it, though, we're going to bring in our wonderful, near regular guest now, Chloe Mills, who's our operations manager at Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship, for our stewardship story today. Hey, Chloe.
Hello, Phil. Hello, Lydia.
Hey,
Nice to
Chloe.
see you.
Thanks for coming on.
Likewise.
I have a question for you today.
Ooh.
How many different types of plants do you think you ate this week?
Okay, we talked about this, and I did start counting. So maybe we should tell them about the challenge, Chloe, and then I'll reveal my total for the week.
Okay. I recently learned about a nutrition trend that has been around for a few years where people try to eat 30 different plants, and that's 30 different types of plants per week. This was based on a 2018 large-scale study from the American Gut Project. And they found that people who eat 30 or more different types of plants per week have a greater variety of gut bacteria, which is good because that can improve your digestion, immunity, metabolism, lots of good effects there. So this 30-a-week idea kind of captured people's attention, and it's been popularized in the media. So should we reveal our numbers if you kept track?
Whoa. Drum roll.
I got 16. So, 51% there. All right, Lydia.
Not bad.
Well, I feel like it's not fair because I traveled this week, and so I got some exotic fruits and vegetables and things. So I got 47 different plants.
Oh my goodness. Lydia beats us all.
And you
Probably.
have to let us know where you traveled, Lydia. Let all the listeners know, because maybe there's a thing to that.
Well, I mentioned in our episode with Sharon Eubank that I was going to visit Japan because Sharon loves Japan. So I was in Japan. So I got persimmons, chestnuts, lots of rice, lots of just great fruits there. Lots of different things.
I got 23, I think. And I say I think because there were a couple of things where I ate it and it had many plants in it. So like curry, for example, when curry has a bunch of different plants in the powders that you make for curry, but then it was only a serving or a couple of servings of the curry concoction. So how does that count? If I did that, it was like 30 almost. But if not, at 23 is where I was at.
Okay, that's a good segue to what counts as a plant, because fruits and vegetables, pretty clear they're plants, but this plant also counts nuts, seeds, whole grains, and even things like olive oil and spices. So perhaps, it's easier than it looks, although I'm going to try to catch up to you guys next week, especially Lydia. But there's nothing magic about the number 30 specifically. It was just used as a benchmark in this study, and it was kind of easy to remember, so people grabbed onto it. But it's kind of a fun experiment to just see how much variety you're eating. We're not endorsing, restrictive eating habits or, spending tons of money or something that's not feasible for you. But we just want to bring awareness to the awesome amount of foods that we have that are all provided by plants and nature.
I love that so much, Chloe, and it reminds me of the word of wisdom, where it talks about eating fruits and herbs and grains. So, one thing I didn't include that I'm wondering if I should have is chocolate. Does that count? It's made with cocoa beans and sugar cane.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if it did? And according to at least one gastroenterologist, if you eat chocolate that's at least 70% cocoa, it counts. So if you like that really bitter, dark chocolate, good for you. Eat it up.
Mm. I really like that idea. It's a really straightforward way to eat. I've heard a quip from a food writer that I really like, Michael Pollan, and there was a documentary in that he was being interviewed, and he said, "Eat as many colors as possible. The more colors you see, the better you're at." I feel like this is a similar thing. It's a really easy quip to remember. I'm gonna try and track that more for a few weeks now and see how I do. Was I just eating more this week because I knew I was tracking it, or is it pretty natural to have it there? So I love it. And I bet that our guest, Allie Essig, has no trouble eating 30 different plants each week. We'll probably talk a little bit about that. Chloe, thanks for stopping by and
Of
talking about
course.
eating as many plants as possible in our diet and just how many count. I like that. So maybe if we're spices and nuts people, that you're going to get a lot of them pretty easily each week.
And we'll link that study in the show notes too, so people can
Great.
check it out for themselves.
Thanks, Chloe. All right. It is now time to bring in our guest, Allie Essig. Allie Essig is a nutritionist, writer, speaker, YouTuber, advocate, and the founder of the education and coaching company PlantWhys. She is also the host of the podcast Eat Meat Sparingly, a word of wisdom podcast. And she has a YouTube channel, PlantWhys, where she is educating any and every Latter day Saint that would like to have a more plant based diet. We're very, very excited to have her here. And we're especially excited to have her here in November, where the holidays are coming up. And there's all sorts of fun ways that we might be able to rethink our holiday diets and the things that we're making. Hi, Allie.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
We're
Thank
so
you.
excited to have you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
So we just want to start out hearing, I guess this is a two-part question. First, just your stewardship journey in general. How have you come to care for the earth? And then diving in a little more specifically into kind of your journey with the word of wisdom.
You bet. You bet. Well, I think we all have this sense of stewardship as growing up as members of our faith. When I was in college, I would always do like the spring breaks where you would go and save, like the wetlands or go and do other cool service projects like that. And while it always gave me joy, I feel like I didn't really know how to make a true impact on a day-to-day basis. Like I could go and do a service trip, but how do I actually do it day to day? And there's a lot of confusion with messaging on like, wait, should I not use straws? Should I recycle? But then I hear that, are they actually recycling what I'm putting in the bin? All these things. So you never really know. And it wasn't until I came about it a completely different way. In 2019, I had had 6 kids, and I was, just the regular LDS mom who's feeding her kids chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and is in survival mode because I just had twin babies, right? They were number 5 and 6. I'm trying to make things work. I had 4 at home, 2 in school, and it was wild. My husband was serving as a bishop. And then I get one of those phone calls that no one wants to get. And that was when I found out that my husband was in the ER. And I'll never forget opening the ER door, scanning the room, and being like, what's wrong? What's going on? Seeing him. He's 37 years old, slumped over in a wheelchair, looking like he'd aged 50 years. And in my heart, instantly, it was like, he's having a stroke. And so the stroke was affecting his vision, and it took days and months to really even heal from that experience. And so, as you can imagine, work changes, your work life changes, like driving is difficult. And so, we were trying to kind of put the pieces together, figure out why it was that someone so young would have a stroke. And we were never given answers. I wanted the simple answer. He just has a hole in his heart. We'll fix it. He's good as new. But there wasn't that simple answer. It was, he's had one stroke. He's probably at a higher risk of another stroke in the future. So you need to eat a heart healthy diet. And I was like, cool. Okay. What the heck is that? What is a heart healthy diet? And then the dietitian meets with you and they say, avoid trans fat, saturated fat, cholesterol. And you're like, what is that found in? How do I make dinner? I have kids at home. I don't know how to actually apply this. But I think I would have moved on had it not been for the fact that my father had also passed away or had a heart attack in 2012 and had passed away. And that was his one and only heart attack. There was no second chances. And so because of that experience, I was like, I am willing to do whatever it takes because my husband has this second chance that I had begged and wished and pleaded God to have with my dad, but it didn't happen. And so the mother bear came out and I'm like, I don't want to lose my husband like my mom did and like her mom did and like my great grandma did because they all had spouses that died from issues that were related to diet and lifestyle, things that we have power over. And we sometimes just think, oh, it's a heart issue. That's genetic. And it's actually, there's so much you have power over. So as I did my research, I did what everyone would do. I ask influencers and all your friends and, try to gather information, read books from all different types, all different styles, all different genres. And I saw this underlying pattern and honestly, it really fell in line with what is taught in the word of wisdom. And I can't deny like, oh my gosh, we have the truth. And when I went to the temple and prayed, I'm like, what do we do? It was so clear. Allie, follow the word of wisdom completely. Like I've already given this to you, this direction. And so the word of wisdom goes beyond just avoiding drugs and alcohol and coffee. There really is so much there about eating meat sparingly and eating more plants. And I realized I started on this journey just for health reasons. Like it was just, how can we heal my husband? And I realized that the veins in your brain, the arteries are so tiny and sensitive to oxidation. And you really need more antioxidants in order to combat any of that damage that has gone on. And you only get those from plants. And so while this is just for health purposes, I didn't realize that what's good for your heart, it's good for your brain, it's good for your lungs, it's good for your gut, it's good for not only just you or parts of you, but then it's also really great for animals and it's also really great for the earth. And whenever I second guess, like, am I on the right path? I look at it's not only healthy for you, but it goes beyond you. It goes beyond just whatever your diet is. This is really great for our planet. And honestly, we're to the point with our planet that there needs to be a change because we are using the resources. And as a mom who, like, what impact can I actually have on this earth living in this society? Just eating less meat half of the time reduces your water footprint by 30%. Like, whoa, I mean, it is literally, we can talk about recycling all day long. We can talk about not using plastic straws all day long. But the greatest impact you have on this earth and on this world is to eat less meat just because of factory farming and the current production systems that we have in place right now. When we are eating, we're not living 200 years ago where it was a beautiful closed loop farm system for efficiency, for conspiring men, right? For making money, for all of these things. We live in a world with factory farming and it is incredibly inefficient and it is draining our planet. And so again, I started this journey and I still am 100% in this journey for health reasons, but now it's gone beyond that. It's like, this is so powerful. I like put me on a soapbox. I'm going to tell everyone we have this and we've had this truth the whole time in the word of wisdom, the whole time.
So tell us more a little bit about that. I would love if you could draw out the connections between plant-based eating and eating meat sparingly and the word of wisdom. Could you unpack that for us?
Oh, well. You bet. You bet. No, I think, first of all, let's start with the word of wisdom. It's interesting when we study the word of wisdom, it's kind of like the scriptures that just get passed over. Even in Come Follow Me, like it's not discussed. We're not like, what do you think eat meat sparingly meat? Or in verse 12, where it says, yea, the flesh also of beasts and the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. The definition of sparingly is occasionally, limited amount. It is not every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And then if one's not enough, because you could question that, you're like, okay, but then it's mentioned not just once, but then in verse 13, it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used. Okay, it is pleasing unto me. And how often do we get the Lord telling us what's pleasing unto him? And when you really understand, I think most of us have a blind eye on what exactly is going on with the food that comes to our plate. We have no idea the type of suffering that these animals went through, like the lives that they led. Even just looking at eggs, for example, and eggs are so nuanced, and it's totally different if you're getting eggs from your friend who has chickens in their backyard, right? But the typical egg is from a hen that is stuck in a battery cage their entire life, that they're never able to spread their wings. God created animals not as a commodity, and that's how it's been treated. God created animals so that they can fulfill the measure of their creation and have joy. And have joy. They're not just a commodity, but that's how we're treating it. When you look at pigs, for example, like female pigs, the sows, pigs are smarter than most 2-year-olds. If they, instead of hooves, had fingers, they could sign. They're intelligent, they're playful, and we put them in these crates so small that they can't even turn around. They're going crazy, and just like, can you imagine the anguish and the terrible lives that they're living in these gestational crates, right? For months of their lives. And it's filthy and it's dirty. And again, I'm not even like a big animal person, but when you really open your eyes to this, I think we all need to be more aware that this is happening. And even, I mean, we could go on to cows, we could go on to just even the water usage that's going on. But so that's just like the lives that they're living. They don't have joy. And so no wonder the Lord said, "It is pleasing unto me, they should not be used." But here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's not just when God mentions something 3 times, is when it's like, well, maybe we should look again. And guess what? In verse 15, the verse before that, he says, "And all wild animals that run or creep on the earth." So he's mentioning those animals. Verse 15, he says, "And these hath God made for the use of man, only in times of famine and excess of hunger." Now, 3 times, 3 times in the word of wisdom, it talks about, you can eat meat, like 100%. It's ordained for you. But this is not something that we should be eating to excess, right? This is something that we are asked, like, and famine could be different for individuals. I'm no question. Some people may need, certain animal products for different times in their life. I'm not going to ever tell anyone to go completely vegan, because I think the Lord didn't tell us to do that. He gave us that sparingly. Animals are made for man. However, it pleases the Lord when we do not use them, and it allows these animals to fulfill the measure of their creation of joy. On top of that, let's talk about just the planet, the effects that it has on the planet. Now, again, this is not 200 years ago where we had a beautiful, like, closed loop farm system. Right now, it's basically an open loop. So let's take cows. So these factory farms that are raising cows, they have to do something with the manure, right? And back in the day, 200 years ago, you just take the manure and you use that for fertilizer. Great, right? Beautiful. But it's really expensive to do that now, to actually like carry the manure to different places where we're raising the crops. And it's such an ineffective way of raising food that we are clearing land. We're clearing the Amazon right now to create land for pasture for animals, and as well to grow crops to then feed to animals. So the amount of land that is required to feed animals is insane. It's not efficient at all. But then not only that, to fertilize that land, to help to grow these crops, because it's so expensive to actually take all of that manure that is used in a factory farm and then travel with that and then use it, we use synthetic fertilizer. And synthetic fertilizer is higher in nitrogen, and it's terrible for the planet. It's cheap, it's easy, it's more efficient, but it's not great for the planet. Then you have runoffs. So you have the runoff from this synthetic fertilizer that then is taken into our streams, and you see this dead zone that's happening in kind of the Gulf of Mexico area because of all of this synthetic fertilizer. But you also have, what do you do with this actual, like these legumes of actual manure from these animals? And then the waste and this disease and all of that that's created. Again, we are living in a society where it's all about how can we produce as much meat as possible for as cheap as possible for as many people as possible. And we're looking at it that way, not at the health of the animals or the health of the earth. It's just like, how can we just live like kings, be able to have as much meat as we want? And we are going to have to pay the price eventually, because not only that, but like the water that goes into just like at one hamburger, it's so inefficient if you were to look at that versus a plant-based hamburger. It's so much more efficient to get your protein from plants than it is from animal products.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about living like kings, and it's not the whole world that lives like kings, right? There are people who are affected pretty dramatically by this. So can you speak to how is the global poor affected by, one person? I don't know what the percent is, but a small percentage of the earth eating a lot of meat, how does that affect the rest of the earth?
Well, they're all trying to be like us, which makes it even worse, right? That it's like you see, in different cities in China that they don't have the land like we have, so they literally build buildings where they have tons of pig. They eat a ton of pork, right? The lot we eat beef, they eat pork, and so they're creating these buildings where it's like layers upon layers, and it's terrible again for the earth because you're having to manage all of the waste that comes from that. But also and again, I wanna go back to how everything's connected to the health reasons. You take someone who lives in an Asian-based country and you think, "Oh, that's so sad for them that they don't get what we get," right? And you move them to America, and then all of a sudden they're getting American diseases. They are transformed in the type of cancers and heart disease that they get. Breast cancer rates are so incredibly low in Japan, where they're eating tofu for their protein. One of the blue zones is Okinawa, Japan, where they have the most centenarians. Centenarians are individuals that live to be 100 years old and older. And they are some of the healthiest individuals, and they eat meat, but it's very sparingly. They mostly like survive off of sweet potatoes. But even them, things are changing as they're like, yes, those are the grandparents that are the living long lives, but their grandkids aren't because they're starting to get more fast food restaurants. They're starting to live more like we are. And they're looking to America like this is the way to live. But truthfully, they're the ones that have it right. Like those who have less money, who can't afford the meat and the dairy that we can, are living longer, healthier lives. They're eating sweet potatoes. They're eating a variety of plants because they're just cheaper and easier. And so, like mentioning before, eating at least 30 different plants in a week is so good for your gut microbiome, and we don't even think about it, and it seems like a challenge, and it seems so difficult and hard to us because we eat meat to help us feel full, where they have to eat potatoes and different varieties of things to feel full.
Mm. So I'm curious a little bit on some somebody comes to an awareness of this,
Mhm.
and there's, as you said, there's a lot of nuance. It's a very complex thing thinking about global food systems, and it's probably not necessarily the answer to just carte blanche say we get rid of the industrial food system because there's roles that it plays. But then at the same time, there's an absolute excess, and there's the idea of open and closed loop systems, and
Mhm.
how you're really in an increasingly globalized and connected world. It's hard not to be a part of it. So somebody comes to that awareness and they're like, wow, that's overwhelming. But it also is a lot of stuff that I can't control.
Mhm.
How do you help someone feel that they can wrap their arms around the things that they can control in their life, and become more conscious without necessarily needing to say they're in a scenario where it's doing the most radical solution is not available to them, but they do at least want to do something different.
Never underestimate the power of the individual. Even just the fact that we have more plant-based options in fast food restaurants, that you can choose different like proteins that are not actually meat or chicken, or beef. And so never underestimate the power that you have. And as more plant-based sources just become better and better, the more people tend to choose those or want to buy them or do that. But I always say it does feel overwhelming, but it is literally the most powerful lever you can pull to improve the earth. Like, as an individual, the most powerful lever. You can do all these other things, but I truly believe the most power you have is over the food that you put in your mouth because you do it 3 times a day. And I've heard it estimated, and I don't have the exact statistic, but I've heard it estimated that the individual has, on average, eats around 200 animals a year. 200. Like, and if you think you don't have power, like, that's insane how much power you have. Like, the impacts that you have by just not choosing chicken, on your plate, or and I'm sure that that includes seafood, right? So then if you think about that, how easily that adds up. But you have so much power. And don't ignore the power that you have. And it can be just cutting the amount of meat you're eating in half. It does not have to be all or nothing. It can be one meatless meal a week. And that makes a difference. One meatless meal makes a difference. To even just choose beans, like you don't even have to eat the weird fake meats. Like I didn't do it. I was like, that's weird and bizarre. I'm here for the health reasons. And beans, they found that those who eat a cup of beans a day tend to, on average, live 4 years longer than everyone else. So just prioritizing beans as part of your protein. So instead of cooking ground beef, like a pound of ground beef, add half black beans to that. It doesn't have to be this all or nothing perspective. If you go 100% vegan, 100% plant-based, you cut your water footprint down by 60%. But even if you just go halfway, your water footprint goes down by 30%. There's no other action that you can do in your life that is going to impact the planet by that great of a percentage.
Yeah, so it feels like there's so many layers of motivation to do this. There's health, your family's health, there's the welfare of animals, there's the environmental impacts, the impacts on poor people around the world. And then I keep thinking too about something George Hanley mentioned in one of our first episodes about how Jesus loves the earth so much. How God created the earth as this beautiful, sacred thing, which you've mentioned a few times. Animals were created to fulfill the measure of their creation, not to fulfill the measure of our creation, and to have joy. And I feel like it really is the way that we view food in our society is so commodified. And if we can shift that perspective to viewing creation, plants and animals as sacred, I think that would change so much of how we eat and how we waste food too, I think is a big thing. We had Sharon Eubank on last week and she talked a lot about how what we waste affects other people's opportunities. So anyway, just keep thinking about that idea of if we view creation as sacred, everything changes. So can you speak to that a little bit?
And I think that's where, it's funny because, again, I went plant-based for health reasons, and I was watching some documentary and seeing, like, some poor animal, like, and I just had this overwhelming, almost a spiritual feeling of, like, you can make a difference. You can make a difference in this suffering. Jesus came and he said that he counts all the sparrows. You know what I mean? He is aware. He cares. And while it's not, a lot of people are like, well, we don't really talk about eating meat sparingly because it's not related to our worthiness in order to go to the temple. So and it's true. It does not impact how like your relationship with God. I know a lot of amazing, very spiritual people who eat a lot of meat, right? Like but I say, why settle? Why not try eating less meat and see how much more in tune with the spirit you become as you honor his creations, as you come closer to God by respecting what he mentioned 3 times in the word of wisdom to do, pleases him. And just like when my child does something that pleases me, it just gives me a little bit more love and like attention to him, or her, if they're doing something that makes me happy. Like, what a great gift we can give the Savior. It is pleasing unto him that they should not be used. And there's a lot of drama around the comma that's placed there. They're like, well, the comma was inserted in 1921, so it really means it's pleasing unto me. They should not be used only in famine. But if that's the case, then Hiram Smith, who read this exact scripture right before any comma was inserted, then why would he say that the word of wisdom was made for man and our basically desire to kill the brute creation, right? Like it was very clear to Hiram Smith why why we should not be eating as much meat. He was actually a big proponent of not eating meat as often as they were back then. And so it goes beyond the comma. Like I say, it's mentioned 3 times. And if that was the case, he wouldn't have used the word sparingly. If it's meant to be used all the time, then why was the word sparingly used there? Because sparingly is defined as occasionally, not all the time.
So I don't want to belabor this too much, but because it should go without saying. This, however, doesn't mean that I'm going to go next week and find my neighbor who's a cattle farmer and vilify them for
No.
what they do, right?
I know. Yeah, you can't. People have to come to it on their own. But I think this podcast is great, spreading the word. And in fact, it's funny because sometimes there's a lot that goes into this too. Like, not only on top of that, processed meats is a group 1 carcinogen, right? So bacon, ham, even the healthiest chicken sausage you can buy. And so a lot of times I'll see these amazing people and they're like, "Oh, this is my breakfast of choice and it's eggs and ham and bacon and and I'm like, "That's a group 1 carcinogen." Like why would you expose yourself to something that it is a known carcinogen? It's like in the same category as cigarettes, you know? And I want to tell them, and I have done that in the past, that's not the way to do it. The only way to do it is to use your personal influence to spread the word to people who want to hear. And there's going to be people who don't want to hear. There's going to be haters, and to just let it go. Like it's okay. You're not here to convince anyone. You're just here to invite them and to show them. And that's why I realized with my YouTube channel, the biggest influence I can have is to show people how to make plant-based taste delicious. That's it. I can invite people to my house and I could be like, "Yep, this Wisconsin cauliflower soup has no dairy in it and you would never know and it's so amazing." Like that's the biggest influence I can have is to show them that yes, plant-based eating can be delicious. It can be good and you don't have to be a crazy mean vegan who's like, "You are making other animals suffer. You're a terrible person." Because that's not how Jesus lived, right? That's not what Jesus did. He showed by example more than anything else.
I love that. And that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is talking about holiday foods. We'd love to hear some of your favorite plant-based recipes that you use during the holidays, and hopefully we can link some of them in the show notes for people to make.
You bet. I'll send you all my links. So here's the thing. People are always like, "What do you eat?" And I'm like, you know what? I eat meat sparingly with Thanksgiving. So it would make sense that because it's with Thanksgiving, even though I could go into all the factory farming of all the turkeys, I do host Thanksgiving and I do provide that for other people. I may or may not eat the turkey, but I do provide it. But what I can do is make really delicious potatoes that don't have any dairy in them or butter and they feel good in your body. And so instead of dairy or butter, I can just use cashews as long as there's not a nut allergy. Cashew cream. So if you take cashews with water and blend it up and turns to a delicious cream, you add rosemary and thyme and all those like garlic, all that flavor, and you can have some amazing potatoes. You would never know that are plant-based necessarily. My favorite also is pies. Like, if you've never had date caramel, basically it's dates, add water to your blender, it turns into this most delicious caramel. But here's the best part, it feels good in your body. Like you add cinnamon to that, and then you make a pie, and you make a pie with like a whole wheat flour, and you're adding just healthy, wholesome ingredients that don't have animal products in it. And then not only is it delicious, but it feels good. You can almost eat it for breakfast the next day and feel satisfied and satiated. And it prevents you from overeating because you're not eating such high calorie dense foods. So you don't feel gross. The worst part about holiday meals is how you feel afterwards. No one wants to feel bleh, like when you're around family. This is the time to celebrate. This is the time to really spend time with family and not feel like you have to go take a nap because you overate, and you feel really heavy and gross. And when you eat more plants or prioritize plants and get creative on how to swap out a lot of the dairy, you will feel so much better. You really will.
That's such a good point because, yeah, we all feel that kind of sag after the meal, and we could be playing games that whole time instead of sitting around and kind of just napping for an hour.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. Some of us feel satisfied and like a nap. I don't want to
Okay,
get rid of
that's
my
true. That's
naps.
true. There's nothing wrong with a nap.
I love a good nap, but I also don't want to wake up from my nap feeling like, oh, I feel so gross, you know?
Sure, sure. Because you filled your body with so much stuff that it's like you got meat sweats in your
For real, do you feel it? And I think that's the biggest difference too when, thinking about eating plant-based and stewardship and your ability to feel the spirit. Like I just want to almost invite you to this world because you feel lighter. You feel more sensitive. You feel the still small voice so much easier. And I think it makes sense as part of the word of wisdom where we're talking about avoiding things like alcohol and drugs so you can feel the spirit. And that's great. But there is also a higher law to that. And that higher law is also eat more plants, eat less meat, and you're going to be even more sensitive to the spirit. You're going to be even more sensitive to the inner intuition and it's amazing.
Like energy, physically and spiritually. That's really interesting. And I think that's so true of so many things in the gospel where we're given a really clear starting point. But why would we just stay at a starting point when we have the capacity to reach higher and to become even closer to God and more capable of serving others in our lives. And this energy, just sounds like you're able to do more good in your life because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes beyond. It's like love. When you do things with love, love is the only thing in the universe that when you divide it, it multiplies. And when you choose food that is not creating, I guess, as much suffering, there's no perfect food in our modern society, but you're making a more loving choice, and it's going to multiply in different ways that you can't even see or comprehend right now. Like one of my friends, she's like, I could never eat like you because I'm afraid of everything I'd give up. And I see what she eats, and I'm like, are you kidding me? You eat 5 things. Like, you eat like, you have no taste of flavor. When I went plant-based, it opened up a world. It was like this door, like this double door that I opened up, and all of a sudden, there's all these tastes and flavors that I had never even experienced before. You talk about curry before and all these spices, and now I can taste them because they're not masked with, like, cream or cheese that just kind of, like, dulls the flavor of everything else. Now I'm more aware and sensitive to, like, "Oh, is that rosemary? Oh, is that thyme? Oh, is that," like, it's so cool to be able to be more sensitive and to the different flavors and to taste them because it's not just covered in cream.
I can understand why that person may feel that way, because if you only do eat 5 things, you almost maybe have a scarcity mindset, and or you might be thinking, "I do this because it's simple. My life is complicated right now, and it's hard for me to spend so much time thinking about food." Like you mentioned earlier with you and all your children, we don't have 6 kids, but we're right in the middle of that, and I'm just thinking about how with schedules and everything, it's difficult, and that, my 2 oldest boys, they some days feel it's as if it's emetic or they're allergic to vegetables or whatever that is. What would you say to folks who are like that? Like, because like you said, it expands when you really commit to it and you really see the richness and diversity that there is out there in the bounty of the earth. Are there steps that people can take that can keep it not so overwhelming but simple? Like what are some easy ways that they can double or triple that 5 to a 10 or 15 things that they eat?
So I think here's the biggest thing. We always have these limiting beliefs, and honestly, they're false beliefs that it's going to be more time consuming and it's probably going to be more expensive. But the truth of it is actually less time consuming. Do you know how fast it is to open up a can of beans than it is to, like, cook, marinate meat, do all these things? Like, it's faster, to cook a potato, it takes like 4 minutes, right? It's faster, and it actually will save you money. On average, someone who goes completely vegan saves $750 a year. A year. So again, us, not perfect, but I'm not buying meat or dairy at the grocery store. So I invite you to stop buying as much meat or dairy. Like, instead of just subconsciously putting in, the sour cream and putting in the cheese, maybe just start by, like, making making cashew sour cream is the easiest thing on the planet. You literally put the cashews in the blender with water. Like, it doesn't have to be this overwhelming thing, but then that's another plant, right? Like, you're getting nuts. Nuts are going to help minimize your risk of heart disease by 25% if you eat them regularly. Like, they're so powerful, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm just doing this because of the flavors. You're doing that, and there's so many benefits to doing this. You're using less water, you're getting more nutrients in your body. And I always say, obviously prioritize the plant so that every time you're looking down, you make sure that each meal has a fruit, a vegetable, a whole grain, and a type of protein. This protein can be legumes. It can be a mix of meat and legumes. It can be tofu. We weren't even into tofu at first until I started eating. I use tofu to cream things. So you can do silken tofu for, like, your smoothies. It makes them really creamy, adds more protein instead of just going to protein powder, right? But you have to flavor plants like you do meat. How many of you just, like, take a piece of chicken, right, without any salt or any flavor and cook it? Like, no, we don't, but we do that to vegetables all the time. You're like, "Okay, let me just thaw the frozen vegetables." No wonder no one likes to eat them. And so if you actually take the time to flavor them, and it doesn't take much, it doesn't have to be expensive or time consuming, but even just some wood-fired garlic salt is like magic, you know? You put that on top of veggies, and they are delicious. And so just really be more intentional about what you're flavoring your food with, and then your kids will like them. But there is always this transition period. And when I never told my family, "We're going plant-based, that's it. You're never gonna have meat again. Like, you're never gonna have dairy." They would have rebelled. They would have thought
I'm
mom's
putting the
going
foot
crazy.
down today.
I know, right?
Yeah, no.
No, not at all. There was this transition where my daughter was like, "Are you gonna buy more chicken nuggets?" And you know what else is fascinating? Is that plant-based chicken nuggets are slightly more expensive, but they're not a group 1 carcinogen. We look at them like, "Oh, they're processed, they're terrible." Actually, real chicken nuggets are incredibly processed and carcinogenic. And so even if it's just that simple swap, and guess what? No kid that I've ever had over, then give them plant-based chicken nuggets ever knows the difference. So that is something super simple. But in general, I stopped buying the chicken nuggets, but would tell my kids like, "Oh, yeah, maybe next time." Like, "Oh, I forgot this time." It wasn't this issue or this thing. And again, even just adding half beans, just get them familiar with the flavors. Your taste buds will change. They will change. Like I hated tofu and now I like crave it. I think it's so good. Give it 10 days, your taste buds really will change over. In fact, one of my friend Brenda, when she first went plant-based, she, like, spent all this time making this soup, and then she tasted it and was like, "This is gross. Like, this is horrible." But she's like, "I spent all this time making it." So she froze it, put it in the freezer. 6 months later, after, like, going through a plant-based transition, pulled it out of the freezer, and she's like, "I better eat this now," and thawed it, ate it, and was like, "This is amazing. This tastes so good. How did I think this was gross?" You know?
That's great. Um, so on the theme of holidays, traditions. If people have traditions that may lean in that direction more, what would you say about that? How do you just navigate tradition generally with food?
Yeah. So one thing is number one, if it's dear to your heart and you're only doing it once a year, then don't let go of it. Like it's not a big deal. I will say if I had a meatball right now, I would probably be ill the rest of the night. So I do like that, there's plant-based meatballs that don't make me as sick, and that's always an option that you can use. They taste pretty similar. But the third thing is you would be surprised. Swapping out butter is one of the most heart healthy action you can do. Butter is rich in saturated fat and you feel it. Like you don't feel good when you eat butter. Maybe there's like the randos that do, but most of us do not feel good. And again, you'll become more sensitive over time. But what you can do is swap out olive oil. Like if I'm making popcorn with my kids, I'm using olive oil instead of butter, like a simple swap. So if you're making a sweet potato casserole, even if you buy the plant-based olive oil butter instead of regular butter, you will feel better. It's lower in saturated fats, better for your heart. You're not going to get sick from eating it afterwards or just not feel as good. So those are simple swaps of just doing the non-dairy version or the plant-based version, or not even swapping for a holiday food. It is literally one day out of the whole year. It's not a big deal. To me, the biggest change you can make is what you're eating Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, on a typical day. Even if like maybe on the weekends you go out to eat. When I go out to eat, all if there is not a great plant-based option, because I'm also not going to choose something that has a ton of dairy in it just because it doesn't have meat. So I'll probably choose like the salmon or something like that. I really look at it is what is going to make me feel good over is it just vegan? And so thinking of it that way, being more again, but that comes by being more sensitive once you've taken out some of those heavier animal-based products.
I'm also thinking about so I mentioned my mom is a big plant-based eater. She's gone kind of like almost 100%, I think. But we have a big family with lots of brother-in-laws. I come from a family of 5 girls, and so we have 4 brother-in-laws that come over for dinner, and my dad has been really open. I think he's like maybe 90% plant-based. And then my brothers-in-law are not as excited about plant-based eating. And so my mom will have some chicken on the side or cheese or sour cream. And I just know there's so many different preferences in the family. So it sounds like as you're raising your kids, you've been able to convert them completely. So I'm curious about like your husband's reaction. Obviously, it was his health that kind of motivated everything. So I'd be curious to hear his reaction and just how you navigate preferences in extended family things and in your own family.
So, when it comes to change, the pain of staying the same has to be greater than the pain of change. So, my husband had a stroke, and also he was younger. And I do feel like sometimes the older generation, like I get a lot of older ladies who are like, "Oh, my husband had a stroke and he won't change." I'm like, yeah, sometimes the older you get, the more in your ways you get, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of benefits to being open to change. But the pain of change has to be sorry, the pain of change has to be less than the pain of staying the same. And for my husband, he couldn't see. Like he had double vision and he was willing to try whatever. And he really liked beans. That was our like, it's like, well, he's like, I've always loved black beans. So we kind of started with what he liked. and we never cut it out completely. I still won't serve animal products for the most part. If someone else buys it, if they bring it, I'm like, if you want to bring it, that's great. That's kind of like my line that I've drawn. My kids get excited to go to Award Linger Longer, and I'll never forget one Sunday. My daughter's like, look to her brother. There's meat, and I let them eat as much as they want. I don't put any restrictions on what they can and cannot eat outside of my house. I just don't have it in my house, and I'm not going to buy it. And so if they want it, they can buy it with their own money, and they can cook it. That's totally fine. When we go to family dinner at my mom's house, at my in-laws, we always eat what's provided. And I always offer to make a plant-based version. For example, last time we were in town, they were having hamburgers. I think they're delicious. Not like the Impossible burgers. There's these Morningstar burgers that I think they're lower in calories, a really good amount of protein, and taste delicious. And I brought them, and no one ate them, but I did. And so I was happy they were available, and that's okay. And it allows people to try it. Maybe I wouldn't say no one ate them. I think they had their burger and they're like, oh, maybe I'll try this. It gives them the option to at least try it out, to be more open to it, instead of we get in our ways of vegan, vegetables, that it's not good. And showing them no, it actually can taste good and can be delicious. And there's a lot of women that I coach that I'm like, look, if you have family members, the relationship is more important than food. Relationships are always more important than food. So you have to make chicken on the side, just make it boring chicken. Cool. Cook the chicken, just make it super boring. It doesn't have to be sexy chicken. It can be boring chicken on the side. Serve it as a side dish. You didn't have to create a lot of effort into it. And then they can see the difference between your amazing, cashew chickpea creation and then just chicken on the side, right? That they'll see and actually want the chickpeas more.
Is there anything else that you thought would be good to bring up, whether that's about holiday foods or just something else you want to share?
The biggest thing, really, my biggest message is, if you really care about the earth, this needs to be something that you are willing to and open to work towards. You don't have to be perfect. The reason why I've been able to do this from the get-go is because I do eat meat sparingly. This was not a complete transformation that I just all of a sudden in one way one day and then the next not all. I am not an all or nothing person. Life is not black or white. It's golden and sparkly, and there's a lot of nuances when it comes to food and when it comes to traditions and habits, and just go with the flow. And I love the study that we heard in General Conference a few years ago, the rabbit study, where these scientists intentionally fed rabbits a high saturated fat, high calorie diet to try to clog their arteries and learn from that. And when they were looking at the results from the study, they found that one group of rabbits actually ate the exact same food as everyone else, but did not have the same reaction in their body. And so when they tried to understand why these rabbits didn't have that same reaction, they found that they came from one group who was the caregiver, the woman who was in charge of feeding them. When she would feed them, would pet them and caress them and give them love. And that truthfully, love is so transformational that it can transform the inside of you, And so if we bring stress to it, just because now I told you that chicken sausage is a group 1 carcinogen, and then you see your kids eating chicken sausage, you're like, that's not helping anything at all. That if you can bring more love, food is meant to be a place of gathering, a place of love, a place of communion, right? Truly with each other. And so to drop the judgment, to just show love, that is going to be more impactful than eating a perfect diet. And so always going back to that. And then, the more love you have, the more aware you become of animals and your impact, and the more willing you are to change out of love, not out of obligation. And the word of wisdom, it really is, most of it is not a commandment, right? We think of it's part of it. We've kind of turned into a commandment to enter the temple, but most of it really is an invitation to a higher law, like an invitation out of love. So it's look, if you really do love the earth, maybe let's look inside ourselves and see how we can change, even if it's being more loving to others, not littering as much, and also let's eat less animal products.
I love that. And it's love for God, love for ourselves, love for our families, love for our neighbors, love for the animals. It's all motivated by Christ-like love, and I think that's such a beautiful way to end this episode.
Yeah, that gives me goosebumps. I love that. Thank you. We've got our 3 signature questions that we always ask our guests. So if you don't mind, we'd love to fire those at you. Okay, the first is what is you've already said many things actually. So if you were to just say in a summative way, what is something our listeners can start doing today that will bless the earth?
What are you eating for your next meal? Just what are you eating for your next meal? Just try it. Try something new, right? Maybe even if all it is eating an apple in addition to whatever meal you're eating. The one thing I didn't talk about, I talk a lot about eating meat sparingly, but really the most powerful approach to it is to flood your plate with plants. And then all of a sudden the meat does become the sparingly piece because you have flooded your plate. And again, every time you look down, I want you to think for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner, do I have a fruit on my plate? Do I have a vegetable on my plate? Do I have a whole grain or a potato on my plate along with the protein? Like potatoes are fantastic, actually. They're one of the most satiating foods on the planet. The potatoes are used for weight loss all the time. As long as you don't put the butter and the cream and the ranch dressing on top of them, they're so powerful to keep you full and satiated. And there's so much power in plants. And I think that's sometimes the message with like earth and stewardship, the message kind of turns to eating meat sparingly, but really truthfully, in my heart of hearts, I want the world to see how powerful prioritizing plants, being more plant forward can actually be. Because when you do that, it makes the eating meat sparingly part really easy because you're just shifting your focus.
I love that. Add more plants. Such an easy thing to do.
Mhm.
Okay, our next question is where was the last place you felt a sense of deep awe and wonder?
Okay, so I I this is really kind of silly to say this, but I have been thinking about how to make your day a day of prayer, like that you're constantly praying and how can I if we're all one and spreading more love, can I just pray for every person that I see? Like one day. So at the gym, literally like this morning at the gym, I made it my goal that every person I saw, I was going to send them a silent prayer. Like send them and it was just amazing like the amount of love, like just seeing people in their eyes who they really are, recognizing like the diversity of people that we have around us and just that something so mundane as just being in the gym and like a cold hard location. But when you see people for who they are and really try to send them love and pray for them, it's a really easy gift that we can give. Is if we're really trying to be a light and to shine our light, why not send light to other people and more intentionally as you go by?
You need to go and approach them a few days from now and say, "Hey, on, uh, on Friday, did you perform better?"
I know, like, how was it? Did you feel good? Did you feel good? And
Um,
I think about it, I would love it if someone did that for my kid. I always go back to like, as a parent, I love my kids so much. And wouldn't that be so sweet if someone who just, walked by them, prayed for them? Like, oh, yeah, give them all the help you can?
I know, it's so wonderful. I love that. The last is how has your commitment to earth stewardship brought you closer to God?
Nature is fascinating, right? There are no straight lines in nature if you've ever noticed, right? It's not like this perfect we build buildings that are nice and straight and if you look at nature, for some reason in our life, we feel like, okay, I want to get to this destination. I want to get to path, to B and I'm at A. It should be a straight line, right? But when you look at nature, it has so many lessons for us that it's never a straight line. And as you're meandering and as you're going in and through that, there's so much beauty in the process. But even just taking a second to see, like I was in a really stressful time of my life and I remember distinctly looking out my window and seeing the river and just the sparkles from the light on the river and just thinking there is so much beauty if we're willing to open our eyes and see it. And honestly, it's also easier to hear God's voice in nature. As we're out in nature, the stillness is so much easier to hear that still small voice from him, just to be outside around around his creations, all of those things. And so it's amazing to me that the choice to go plant-based, again, started as a health journey, but has really turned into this expansive, transformative experience that's opened up my heart, in ways that I never thought it could.
That's amazing. Allie, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel is probably my biggest like well-known platform. It's called PlantWhys, PlantWhys, and it's a cooking channel. I literally show you, okay, this is what I made. Did my kids like it or not? Like this is what I'm trying to make plant-based eating delicious. Like if I only had one meal to give to someone who eats meat, that they could like what would it be? Things like that. And so definitely check that out. And then for those who know the science, they know they want to eat plant-based but they struggle doing it on their own. I have a coaching program. Through all this, as we transitioned my family, I had this dream. You're gonna think I'm crazy, but in this dream, I got a missionary call that I was called to serve on the vegan transition committee. And so I'm
The
like, okay,
VTC, baby.
I got the VTC. And so I'm like, okay. And I really do help people transition in that transitory process where they feel like they can't do it on their own. They know they need to, whether they have breast cancer or, they've had heart disease or an autoimmune disease and they know they need to, they understand why, but they just can't. And so I help them through my coaching program. And I'm happy to give you guys a link to give anyone a free month, even if they just want to check it out, to get a free month inside the program to see, how they can just take it one baby step at a time, focus on one little thing at a time. And honestly, that first step is every time you look down, do you have a fruit or vegetable, a whole grain and a legume, and then being held accountable for doing that. And then I do have a podcast called Eat Meat Sparingly, where I just am crazy passionate about the benefits of living the whole word of wisdom. And so that podcast is literally all about all the science to, you know, I've had some specialists on there to talk about, well, how do you do a few of diabetes and what about cancer and what about, all these other things? Are eggs okay? Are they healthy? Are they not? Like all of those questions that you have, I go deep into the science on the podcast. So I show you how to do it on my YouTube channel. On the podcast, I tell you why. And then through my actual coaching program, I help you actually make the change.
Wow, such incredible resources, and that's an incredible offer for our listeners to do a month free. So that's super cool. I can't wait to check all those out.
Should we do our month free together, Lydia?
Yeah, let's do it, bro.
I love it. And I love it at the beginning you talked about the eating 30 different plants. There's a really great book called Fiber Fueled by Dr. Bolshewitz that wrote that tells about the benefits. Like even if you're just wanting to learn more, there's so many resources, so many amazing plant-based books. I also love the book How Not to Die. So many good ones that you're like, okay, there's a lot of information here if you just open your eyes to it.
My mom is crazy about Dr. Gregor, so
He's awesome.
she's gonna love this episode. Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much. This was amazing.
Really appreciate you coming on. And we will see you in all of the platforms you just mentioned and encourage all of our listeners to see you there. Thanks again, Allie.
Thanks for having me.
Now it's time for listener feedback. Our feedback today is from our interview with Madeline Hahn in September. If you haven't listened to that episode, I would encourage you to check it out because it's pretty incredible. This comment comes from Graham Winkle, who is the chair of the UK Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship chapter. He said, as a UK viewer, I am for what is right rather than any particular political slant. In fact, I feel slightly upset that any comment on caring for the earth is now lumped with other values I may or may not believe in fact, put with politics at all. And I totally agree. I wish it could just be totally separate from politics because it doesn't have to be political at all. So what do you think about that, Phil?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's one of those things where I think that on some level, these issues eventually may become policy issues, right? But they're not partisan issues, and they're not the sort of like blood sport of politics kind of issues. And I really resonated with what Madeline said on that episode about the fact that it's a almost wholly uniquely American saint issue. This idea that Earth stewardship is a thing that has to do with liberal or conservative politics. I thanks for that, Graham, because it's good to be reminded of that, especially because a lot of what we do here and where all of us are based, we're here in the Intermountain West and we're in the U.S. and we can sometimes be a little too Americentric in our views. So
Yeah.
agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Thank you for those comments and for all the other comments and emails we've gotten. We love hearing from you guys. We read everything that we get, and it's always very encouraging. So we would love to hear from any other listeners, hear all your thoughts, and create a community where we can support each other as Earth stewards. So comment on our YouTube or our Instagram, email us at hello@holyearthpodcast.com. And if this content is resonating with you or you find it useful, please subscribe to our feed on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Holy Earth Podcast.
And if you would like to get involved with Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship, visit our website at ldsearthstewardship.org and sign up for our newsletter.
Holy Earth is brought to you by Latter-day Saint Earth Stewardship, a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to honor God by learning and living Latter-day Saint principles of creation care, and with the support of a generous donation from the Nature Conservancy. Our executive producer is Mike Maxwell, and our producer is Marcia Maxwell. Our theme music was composed and performed by Lydia Theobald. Our logo and graphic design are by Annie Peterson. Our social media coordinator is Chloe Mills.